We're on the top of Daf Ayin Tes Amud Beis, and we're studying a statement that's attributed to Rabbi Yanai. Vlad behemas molog. Who owns the vlad of an animal that's nichsei molug? In other words, during the course of the marriage, she inherited an animal, and that animal now gives birth. So the animal itself is called nichsei molug. The vlad itself should be peros nichsei molug. And yet, Rabbi Yanai sort of stuns us, and he says that if a ganav steals this vlad, now this doesn't make any sense, because the vlad is peri and it belongs to the Baal. He should be paying kefil to the Baal. So the Gemara at this point is of the opinion that what Rabbi Yanai means to say is that even though peros belong to the Baal, that's nichsei molug, but the vlad of an animal that's molug has the status of keren. Now, what does that mean? We're afraid that the mother that gave birth, the mother animal that gave birth to this animal, is going to die. It's like the case before of the Elon's rod, that it's going to disintegrate. It's going to dry up. And then, if you give him the Baal, the vlad, she's left penniless. She's left with nothing. So, in order to protect her hefsei and prevent her from losing it, we give the vlad the status of keren, and we're going to take the vlad, sell it on the market, and buy karka, and the Baal will eat peros. The Gemara says, "Kiman lo kirabanim v'lo kichanani." The Sanya, we have a brisa, vlad behemus molog lebal. So according to the Rabbanon quoted here in this brisa, in the ratio of the brisa, the vlad belongs to the Baal. It means it has a full-fledged status of peros nichsei molug. Vlad shivchas molog leisha. But if, on the other hand, she inherits a shivcha, and the shivcha gives birth, then that vlad belongs to the isha. And we'll have to see why. And that's going to come later on in the Gemara. What's the difference between vlad of a behema and the vlad of a shivcha? Chananya ben Achi Yoshi Omar, Asu Vlad Shivchas Molog, Kivlad Behemas Molog. That just like the Vlad of the Behema of Molog is peri, and therefore it's owned by the Baal, and obviously, therefore, if it was stolen, then the Ganav would pay the Baal kefil. So too, the Vlad of Shivchas Molog also is peri and also is owned by the Baal. We're not afraid that the mother animal is going to die and she'll be left with nothing. But it comes out that it's universal, whether it's the Chachamim in the ratio or Hananya in the Sefer, that the Vlad of Behemus belongs to the Baal, and that's against Rabbi Yanai. And where answers Afilu Tema Kedivri Akol, we could say that Rabbi Yanai holds like everyone. And really, in truth, Rabbi Yanai admits that the Vlad of Behemus Molog is Labal, it's peri. And nevertheless, who collects the kefil? The kefil is collected by the Isha. And this is the separate Takonis Chacham. And that is the following. Peri takinu le Rabbanon, peri de peri lo takinu le Rabbanon. So although the Vlad of the Behemus Molog is peros, right? Because the keren is the animal, the mother animal, and therefore the vlad of nichsei molug, behemus nichsei molug, belongs to the Baal. However, kefil is a different story. Kefil is something that's produced by the peros. It's what we call peri de peri, and peri de peri is not Baal, it's not considered peros nichsei molug of the Baal, but rather belongs to the Isha. The Rabbanan never made a takana that the peri of the peri belonged to the Baal. Like, let's say, for example, she brings in an apartment, they rent out the apartment, and they take the rental and they invest it in another apartment. So that second apartment belongs to the Isha. It doesn't belong to him. That's peri to peri. It'll only be the peri of that apartment that belongs to the Baal. And kefil is considered peri to peri. So the Gemara says, Bishleim l'Chananya, I understand the reasoning of Chananya, Hainu lo chashinu l'misa. He's not afraid of Misa. He's not afraid that she'll be left with nothing. And therefore, the Vlad of Behemoth Malud and the Vlad of Shivchas Malud belong to the Baal. This is Peri. Elo Rabbanon. Is I don't understand. If Rabbanon in the case of the Shivcha, we're afraid that she'll die, and the Isha is left with nothing because the Vlad is considered Peri that belongs to the Baal, is a few Vlad Behemoth Malud Namilo. Why should the Baal have rights to Vlad Behemoth Malud? We should be afraid that the mother will die and the wife, is left with nothing. But Ilo Chai Shulamisa is a few Vlad Shivchas Malud Nami. Shivchas Malud should also be like the Vlad of the Behemoth Malud. It should belong to the Baal because we're not choshish for the Misa of the mother. And more answers. Li Olam Chai Shulamisa. According to the Chachamim, we are choshish for Misa, and that's why the Vlad of a Shivcha is Leisha. However, in the case of Behema, Shiny Behema, the Ika Ora, she won't, even in an event that the mother animal will die, she still has something left. She has the Ora of the Behema, the hides of the animal, and that's worth something. And therefore, it's lo kol legamri. The only time that the Rabbanan made this takana on behalf of the Isha is in a case of kol legamri. But if she still retains something, some vestige of property that's worth something on the market, then we consider it as nitzei malug and it belongs to the Baal. Omar Avuna Barchi Omar Shmuel halacha kechananya. We're not choshish lemisa. In the case of nitzei malug, the bloodos belong to the Baal as peri. Omar Rav Nachman Afal Gav Yor Shmuel halacha kechananya. Moder Chananya, Shimnis Garsha. So again, what's the case? A woman brings a shivcha of Nichse Malug into the marriage. The shivcha gives birth to Malodos, and they belong to the Baal because Chananya holds Lo Chayshinu L'Misa, and then he divorces her. No senes domim v'notalton. She has rights to. 1 second. She has rights to demand that she maintains ownership on the Vlad of the Shivcha. She will pay the Baal for the value of the Peri, meaning for the value of the market value of the Vlados. And that's called Minei Shevach Beis Avir. Shvach Beis Avir. This is a concept that's going to come up over and over again throughout this sugya that we're learning today. And there's certain things that belong to the family. Certain things that she inherits from her father. I mean, it's sort of like, let's say her father built up a business and it's the family business. So here also, these vlados are like something that she's attached to. She came into the marriage with the shivcha. It's a shivcha that's been working in this family for decades, and these are the vlados of the shivchas that she brought in to the marriage. He calls it here l'shemu tiferes beis avil. Again, this is a kind of a psychological concept. Omar Rav Nachman. If Nisa lo is, right? So she brought in a goat to the marriage, lechalba. So the milk produced by the goat is considered peri, and therefore the Baal owns the chalp. And the same thing applies to the rachel legizasa. The wool that you shear off the sheep is peri, and tarnagolas lebeitzasa, and the egg that is laid by the hen is and also dekel perosov, a tree that produces dates, is ochel v'holech ad shetichla keren. The Baal has rights to eat and enjoy all the above until the keren itself is gone. Let's say the animal dies or the dekel withers up. So I want to read to you the interpretation here of the Masechet. He says the following: Sheyomas bali chayim, right? Let's say the goat dies, or the sheep dies, or the tarnagolas dies, or the dekel withers away. Is Ozi shoyel isha oros habehema notzas hatarnagolas atzei dekel. She is still left with some valuable vestige of the original keren, and therefore the milk and the giza and the beitza and the tmarim are considered like peros, and they belong to the Baal. We're not going to consider it peros if the original parent, so to speak, dies and she's left with nothing. But in each one of these cases, even if the producer, the parent, dies or withers, she still is left with something. And therefore, whatever comes from these is produced by these animals, or in the case of a tree, a dekel tree, that's all called peri and belongs to the Baal. Omar Rav Nachman, Ayla leglima, if she had a garment that she brought into marriage, peri hava. What does that mean, peri? Obviously, the beged itself is worth something on the market. That's not peri. But wearing the beged, or for example, you could rent out the beged, that's already peros. And therefore, michsebe the azil ad chalia. The Baal is allowed to either rent out this garment and the monies go to him, or he can wear the garment until the garment starts disintegrating. And then she's left with keren. What's keren? The shchakim, right? The whatever is left to the, after, so to speak, the I'm using the word disintegration because I don't have an art scroll here, so I don't know the English word of, for what's called bilui begadim. So the Gemara says that even though this keren, even though the beged is eventually going to disintegrate, and therefore we would consider it kalya, which means kalya means it's only keren and he has no rights to wear the beged, but nonetheless, since the blood is worth something, right? Like we spoke about the oros of the behemoth after the behemoth dies, so she will not be left with nothing. It's not kalya, it's not completely lost. Kiman, kihai tana d'sanya. This is a case of a woman who inherited what's called charitzim al sfas hayam, right? These are kind of like diggings by the sea, and those diggings will collect the salt, like you'll see it in the Dead Sea mines over there. So she inherits something that has salt in it, and it could be that they take from these diggings, they take out ground or sand or dirt, and they make bricks out of them. Harezek and peros. Everybody agrees that these are peros because the keren itself is not kola, and it'll always replace itself. So there's always going to be more salt and more chol. However, we have a machlokes now in the case of pir shel gofris or machpores shel tzarif. So I don't know, Rabbi Rhodes, if you happen to have the what's it called, the sifraya? Is that what it's called? This, right? What's it called? Sifria, with the English translation. That's the Steinsaltz translation to English.
Sefaria. And it's
Sefaria.
got actually, it's actually got the Steinsaltz English rather than.
So I think what we're talking about here, again, I'm basing myself on the Hebrew translation, which is very sophisticated, is she inherited a guma. Again, the English word for guma, I don't have it at the tip of my tongue, but it's a sulfur mine, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. That's the best translation I could come up with. And now we have machpores shel tzorif. Okay, so after you mine it, what you're left with is something called a tzorif. He says in the translation here that there are certain chemicals here that you can use for dyeing.
Alum.
What does he call it?
Tzarif equals alum, A-L-U-M.
Yeah, these are dyes, D-Y-E-S, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
You could Google it. Rabbi Meir Omer, Karen. these diggings in the ground, these mines, have the law of the Karen and have to be sold in order to produce peros. It's not considered as peros because nothing is left in the Karen. But Chacham Omer peros. The Chacham say, no, we don't have to sell them. It's considered peros. The karka itself is always there. She'll not lose it. She won't lose it. And therefore it's Karen. Rabbi Shimon Omer, and now we have the mission of Rabbi Shimon, Makom Sheyofa Kocho, etc. Rabbi Shimon Ein Tanakama. What's the nafkamina between Rabbi Shimon and Tanakama? Rava Mechubarim B'Shas Yitzia Ikivinayin. The machlokas here is about peros that are still growing and connected to the ground. They haven't been harvested yet. And what's the status of these peros when the marriage comes to a termination? According to Tanakama, these peros, since they're still attached to the karka at the time of the termination of the marriage, belong to him. It still has the din of peros, so he was zocheh the peros. And Reb Shimon says, no, it belongs to her because it hasn't been cut down from the tree. And that leads us to the Mishnah here in the middle of Daf Ayin Tesamid Beis. Naflu la avadim ushvachos zikenu. So we have now older slaves that are not producing anything. They're too old and weak. The balance is, let's sell them. Yimachru v'yilokach ben karka v'ochel peros. According to Tanakama, that's exactly the rights of the Baal. These are basically Karen, and in the context of Nitzei Malug, the Baal is Zocha in the peros of Karen. This is that psychological connection of the family to the, avodim and shvachos that have been working there for who knows how many years. I can tell you, we had a woman they married who worked for us for 50 years. And when she died, we really wanted to go to her funeral, but it was in a church. We couldn't go. Now we have the case of old olive trees or vines that are not producing peros, they're not producing grapes or olives. And the Baal says, let's sell them. That's his right. Comes along Rabbi Yehuda, that when like we have a Palestinian here working with us, and he always boasts about his olive groves here in Beit Lechem. We're a few inches away now from Beit Lechem. And the Gemara quotes from Kahana Marav, Machlokes, the Machlokes Tanakama, and Rabbi Yehuda is in regard to Zaysim, the Defanim Skanim, is Noflu B'Sada Shalah. In other words, these are on a karka that fell to Yerusha, together with the vines and the olive trees. Let's say the father bought Ilanos, right? He bought the vines or the olive trees, but he never bought the karka itself. The karka belongs to the mocher who sold it to him. is Divrei Timkar. In this case, everybody agrees, even Rabbi Yehuda, that we can sell it. Mishum Kalya Karna. On the one hand, the Keren will eventually dry up, and therefore she'll be left with nothing. And that's not considered Shvach Beis Aviyah because there's no ownership of the father on the karka. If he owned the karka, then you could talk about the emotional attachment to the karka. You know, there's achuzas nafla. Maski Rav Yosef, Harei avodim u'shvachos l'chisada she'enu shelo dami pligi u'pligi. We should really compare avodim u'shvachos in the ratio to the sada she'enu shelo, right? This sada that Rav Kahana was speaking about, she'enu shelo. Because when these avodim and shvachos will die, she'll be left with nothing. And yet we have a machlokes, and it's not universally accepted that the keren, since it's going to be destroyed, therefore we can sell it. So he reformulates the statement of Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana Marav, machlokes besod she'enu shelo. The machlokes in the Tanakama of Yehuda with regard to Ilonos that fell to her in Yerusha, that's in the case of Soda Shein Shalom. The Tanakama holds that there's no Shvach Beis Aviyah, and the Nechasim are Kol Legamre when the trees dried up, and she's not left with Karka, so we might as well sell it. And Rabbi Yehuda holds no, we can still say Shvach Beis Aviyah even on the Ilonos, Avol Besoda Shalom. But if she inherited from her father not just the lonos, but also the character from which the lonos grow, that's already considered shvach beis aviyah, and therefore she can refuse to sell it, and those are her rights, according to the way the takana of the chacham was established. And the Mishnah now on the bottom of Daf Ayin Tes Amud Beis, Hamotzi Otzos Al Nichsei Ishto, a man during the course of marriage spends money and invests it in order to improve the properties that his wife brought into the marriage, and now he divorced her. So the question is, does he have rights to get back his money? Hotzi Harbe V'Yochel Kimo, if he spent a lot of money and he only got an income that's relatively very small, very limited, is then, okay, one second, and that's case number one. Case number two is Kima V'Yochel Harbe. He only invested a limited amount of money, and he was able to get dividends and profits that by far exceeded that which he invested. But nevertheless, in both these cases, Masha Hotzi, and Masha Ochal. He cannot demand that he get reimbursed if the money he spent exceeds beyond that which he ate. And on the contrary, we can't deny him the massive amount of payros, even though his investment was relatively limited. However, Hotzi V'lo Achal. Let's say he spent money and until the gerushin took place, he didn't get a chance to produce anything. So he got no benefit, no dividends whatsoever from his investment. Then he has rights to get back his investment. Yishava Kamahotzi. He has to take a shvua. This is called the shvuas nishba v'notel to testify and swear with an oath that this is the amount of money that he invested. And since he didn't get any profits and he's not eating any payros, therefore, he gets back his investment. Gemara asks Kama Kima. What does the Mishnah have in mind when it says Kima? That he ate a small amount of payros, but he ate enough payros such that he cannot demand in return a rebate on the money that he invested, even though that investment was way beyond the Kima, the small amount of payros. So Rav Asi afilu grogeres achas, one dried fig. They're covered, but only on the condition that the Baal ate this fig derech kvius sudal shulchana. Because he didn't eat out in Rosh Hashanah like, like a thief in the middle of the night. Omar Rabbi Abba, Amri Bei Rav, on the top of the pay, Afilu Shigra de Tamri. Okay, even something called Shigra de Tani, which the Tvarim Sheni Dochu Yachad, they were already smashed, and yet he ate them with their kavod, and therefore he doesn't get any hotzos, and that leaves us with boy Rav Bibi. For the Shabbos Daf Yomi on Daf Pei. So let me take this opportunity to wish you a wonderful Shabbos, the last Shabbos of Tavshin Pei Beis.